Everyone called me Mama Grace. The pastor's wife. The woman who always smiled. The woman who prayed for others. The one everyone came to for advice, comfort, and spiritual guidance. But no one, not even my husband, knew who I really was behind closed doors. I had secrets. Secrets I buried under long dresses and Sunday smiles. Secrets I covered with "God bless you" and perfect family pictures. I wasn't the woman people thought I was. I was drowning, slowly, quietly, in guilt and loneliness. I loved God. I really did. But somewhere along the way, I began to love the image of being a good Christian more than being one. I wanted to be perfect, the perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect pastor's partner. And the weight of that image became too heavy to carry. I started to hide my weaknesses, and in doing so, I created a version of myself that wasn't real. I prayed with people in public, and cried myself to sleep in private. I encouraged women to love their husbands, while I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. I smiled in photos, but my heart was slowly dying. This is the story of how I lost myself trying to please people. How sin crept into my heart, disguised as comfort. How I betrayed the very faith I preached. And how, when everything was stripped away, when my secret came to light, I finally met the God I'd been pretending to serve all along. My name is Grace, and this is what no one knew about me as a pastor's wife. When I married David, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. He was young, passionate, full of vision, the kind of man who made you believe God still called people like he did in the Bible. Everyone loved him. And I loved that everyone loved us. We were the golden couple, the pastor and his beautiful, supportive wife. I wore the title with pride. At 27, I was leading the women's fellowship, singing in the choir, and helping organize church programs. People would say, "Sister Grace, you're such an example of a godly woman." And I would smile and say, "It's all by His grace." But deep down, I was exhausted. Being the pastor's wife wasn't a role, it was a performance. Every Sunday was a stage, and I had to be flawless. My husband was always busy, counseling, preaching, attending meetings. And I was expected to be the quiet strength behind him. When I tried to talk about how lonely I felt, he would say, "Grace, you know ministry comes first. God will reward your patience." So I stopped talking. I learned to swallow my pain and smile instead. People saw our smiles, not our silence. They saw our matching clothes, not the distance between us. They saw our prayers, not the nights we slept on opposite sides of the bed. I told myself, it's fine. Every marriage goes through phases. But the truth was, I was slowly becoming invisible. My husband loved God deeply, but somewhere, he forgot to love me. He was faithful to the ministry, but emotionally absent at home. I began to live two lives. The public one, where I was strong and inspiring. And the private one, where I was lonely and weak. I prayed. I fasted. I cried to God to fix me, to fix us. But heaven felt silent. Then one day, after a Sunday service, a man named Michael joined the church. He was quiet, always sitting at the back, but there was something gentle about him. He often volunteered to help with sound equipment and logistics. I didn't pay him much attention at first. But one afternoon, after a long service, he offered to help me carry the children's supplies to my car. "You look tired, ma'am," he said softly. "You do so much. You should rest." It was the first time in a long while someone noticed I was tired. The first time someone saw me, not the pastor's wife, not the perfect woman, just me. I smiled, politely thanked him, and drove away. But something about those words stayed with me all night. The next Sunday, he was there again, same seat, same gentle smile. He waved as I passed by. I waved back. It seemed harmless. But it was the beginning of a door I should never have opened. I wish I could say I stayed strong. That I recognized the danger early and ran away. But truthfully, it happened so quietly, so slowly, that I didn't even realize I was drifting. At first, it was just friendly conversations. Michael would help after service, lifting chairs, arranging instruments, and then we'd talk a little before he left. He was easy to talk to. He didn't quote scriptures to me when I was tired. He just listened. It had been a long time since someone really listened. My husband, David, was either at a meeting or preparing for the next sermon. And when he did come home, his mind was still at church. Our conversations became short, practical, predictable. How was your day? Fine. Did you call Sister Jane about the women's meeting? Yes. Good night. That was our marriage, ministry reports and good nights. So when Michael asked about me, not about the ministry, it felt strange, but comforting. One evening, after midweek service, I found myself lingering near the sound booth while he packed up. You're always the last to leave, he said, smiling. Pastor's wife duties, I joked. He laughed softly. You make it look easy. That one sentence, you make it look easy, hit me harder than it should have. Because nothing about my life felt easy. I was struggling, but nobody could see it. That night, I thought about those words over and over. And before I knew it, I was looking forward to Sundays again, not because of the sermon, not because of the worship, but because I'd get to see him. That's how the cracks began to form. Small. Harmless looking. Hidden beneath layers of smiles and service. I told myself it was innocent. After all, I was the pastor's wife, I could control myself. But the truth? The truth was that I was lonely. And loneliness is dangerous when it finds someone willing to listen. Weeks passed. Then months. Our talks grew longer. We started exchanging text messages, just, thank you, or, have a blessed night. But one night, I caught myself smiling at his message longer than I should have. My heart raced, that same feeling I hadn't felt in years. Guilt rushed over me. I dropped my phone, knelt down, and prayed. Lord, please, help me. I don't want to fall. But the next day, I replied to his message again. That's how it starts. Not with sin, but with comfort. Not with rebellion, but with need. I started comparing him to my husband. How Michael noticed little things, like when I changed my hairstyle or wore a new color. How he said thank you when I helped. How his eyes held compassion when I talked. And I began to resent David, my husband, my pastor. The man who once made my heart race now made my heart ache. One night, after a long day, I asked David. When was the last time you looked at me, really looked at me? He frowned. Grace, why are you being dramatic? You know I love you. Do you? I whispered. He sighed and turned back to his laptop. We're both tired. Let's not do this tonight. That was it. The conversation ended. I cried quietly beside him while he typed his sermon notes. He didn't even notice. The next morning, I went about my duties, smiling, serving, praying. But inside, I was drifting farther from him and closer to a man I should have avoided. That week, Michael texted me again. You've been quiet lately. Are you okay? And without thinking, I replied. Not really. That message opened a door that would take me years to close. I didn't realize that when I said, not really, I wasn't just replying to a text. I was responding to temptation. And temptation doesn't always come dressed as evil. Sometimes, it comes with kindness. Sometimes, it wears a smile. Sometimes, it looks like someone who finally sees you. I was a pastor's wife. But in that moment, I was just a lonely woman, longing to be seen. After that night, everything changed. What started as short messages became long conversations. We talked about everything, life, dreams, frustrations. I found myself confiding in him the things I used to tell God. He listened like no one ever had. He didn't interrupt, didn't quote verses to correct me, he just understood. I told myself it was harmless, that I just needed a friend. But my heart knew better. Sin doesn't start in the act, it starts in the heart. And mine was already halfway gone. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a rush of excitement. And when days passed without hearing from him, I felt anxious. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced since before marriage, the thrill of being wanted. Meanwhile, church life continued as usual. David preached fire. The congregation grew. People kept calling me Mama Grace, our role model. I smiled, I prayed with them, I even gave marriage advice to young women. And every time I said, put God first, keep your marriage pure, guilt stabbed me like a knife. Because I was no longer pure, not in thought, not in heart. One evening, after a prayer meeting, I found Michael waiting by my car. You seem down today, he said softly. I sighed, forcing a smile. Just tired. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said. It's okay to rest. I nodded. Thank you. Then, for a few seconds, we just stood there, in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. That silence was dangerous. Because in that silence, I felt something I shouldn't have felt: warmth, comfort, connection. I should go, I whispered. He stepped back. Of course. Drive safe. But when I got into the car, my hands were shaking. I knew I had crossed an invisible line, not with my body, but with my heart. That night, I couldn't pray. Every time I tried, his face appeared in my mind. His words echoed, you don't have to be strong all the time. I told myself it was emotional exhaustion. That once I rested, it would fade. But it didn't fade. It grew stronger. Soon, I started finding reasons to see him, helping with church tasks, checking on equipment. One day, while preparing for a church program, I stayed behind to arrange things. Michael was there too, helping. Everyone else had gone home. It was quiet, too quiet. We worked side by side, avoiding each other's eyes. Then he said softly, you look sad today. I'm just tired, I whispered. He turned to me. Grace, you don't have to pretend. And in that moment, the wall I had been building for months, broke. Tears filled my eyes. I told him everything, how lonely I felt, how my marriage had become distant, how I felt invisible. He listened quietly, then said, you deserve to be seen. You deserve love. Those words pierced through my soul. Because deep down, that was what I wanted most, to feel loved again. He reached out and held my hand. Just a touch. But that touch burned. I pulled away quickly, whispering, we can't do this. He nodded. I'm sorry. We didn't say anything else. I left immediately. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed that moment in my mind 1,000 times, the way he looked at me, the way his words lingered. Guilt and desire wrestled inside me. I felt trapped, between the image of a faithful wife and the reality of a broken woman. I prayed. Lord, take this away. Please, take this feeling away. But even while I prayed, I found myself wishing for his message. A week later, it came. I'm sorry for overstepping. I just want you to know I'm here if you ever need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. I knew I should delete it. I knew I should block him. But instead, I replied, thank you. That single word, thank you, was the doorway to the secret life I was about to enter. From that day on, everything changed. My prayers became shorter. My heart became divided. I was living 2 lives, one for God, and one for my secret. And the scariest part? Nobody suspected a thing. Because sin can wear a smile. I still prayed for people. I still sang in the choir. I still said, it is well. But inside, I was sinking deeper. Every day, I looked in the mirror and saw two women. The pastor's wife everyone admired. And the sinner God was calling back home. I used to think I could manage it. That I could balance both, being godly and being secretive. But no one can serve two masters. The thing about sin is, it doesn't stay small. It grows. It spreads. It eats away at your peace until it owns you. What started as harmless friendship soon became emotional dependence. Then, one careless decision turned into 1,000 regrets. I wish I could tell you I stopped it before it got too far. But I didn't. I let loneliness drive me into the arms of someone who wasn't my husband. And for a while, it felt like relief. The guilt came and went like waves, but every time I tried to stop, I'd hear that voice. You deserve love. And I believed it. Months passed. We became experts at hiding. Secret calls. Hidden messages. Private moments no one knew about. I learned to delete chats, hide emotions, and wear a perfect smile. But inside, I was falling apart. My prayers felt empty. My worship felt fake. Every Sunday, I'd look at my husband on the altar, preaching about holiness, and I'd feel my heart burn with shame. I'd whisper, God, please don't let him find out. But I should have prayed, God, please forgive me. Because when you pray for protection of your sin, not freedom from it, exposure becomes mercy. One Friday evening, I was in my room preparing for a women's conference. David was in the living room, reviewing his sermon notes. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. I miss you. Can I see you tomorrow? I shouldn't have replied. But I did. Just as I hit send, I heard footsteps. David walked in, holding out his hand. Can I borrow your phone, love? My battery's dead. My heart stopped. Wait, it's charging, I said quickly. But he'd already seen the screen light up. His eyes caught the message. For a moment, the world froze. Who's Michael? He asked quietly. My mouth went dry. He's one of the church workers. And why is he saying he misses you? Silence. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, ashamed. His face went pale, disbelief, pain, confusion all at once. Grace, he whispered. Tell me it's not what I think. But it was. I broke down. Tears. Confession. Everything came pouring out. Every lie. Every secret. Every hidden moment. He just stood there, silent, staring at the woman he thought he knew. Then he said, You destroyed everything we built. And he walked out. That sound, the door closing behind him, echoed in my soul for months. I sat on the floor that night, holding my Bible. The same Bible I used to teach others about faithfulness. And for the first time, I saw the truth, not in words, but in pain. I had preached purity and lived hypocrisy. I had taught women about trust and broken mine. I didn't just betray my husband. I betrayed the God who gave me grace. Days turned into weeks. David moved out. Church leadership called meetings. Whispers spread faster than prayer points. Did you hear what happened to pastor's wife? How could she? I knew something wasn't right. Everywhere I went, eyes followed me, judging, whispering, condemning. The woman who used to counsel others now sat at the back of the church, ashamed to look up. Some friends avoided me. Others sent messages saying they were praying for me. But no one could save me from the guilt I felt inside. My home was empty. My phone silent. My heart shattered. I didn't even blame them for judging me. Because deep down, I judged myself harder. I wanted to disappear. I thought about leaving the city, starting over somewhere far away. But God had other plans. He wasn't done with me yet. Sometimes God exposes us not to destroy us. but to deliver us. My exposure broke me, yes. But it also became the first step toward my healing. Because when the masks fell, when there was nothing left to hide behind, I finally met the real Grace. The one who needed mercy more than a title. After David left, the house felt like a grave. His clothes were still hanging in the wardrobe. His books still on the shelf. But the laughter, the prayers, the warmth, they were gone. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost. I tried to pray, but my words wouldn't come out. I'd kneel and whisper, "Lord, forgive me," but guilt shouted louder than grace. I stopped attending church for a while. I couldn't bear the stares, the whispers, the pity. Some said I was possessed. Others said it was pride. But I knew what it really was, sin. My sin. My choices. My disobedience. I had fallen, not because I didn't know better, but because I thought I could hide from God. And now, He was letting me face myself. The wilderness is a strange place. It's quiet, painfully quiet. There are no applause, no compliments, no ministry titles. Just you, and your mistakes. For months, I woke up with swollen eyes from crying. Some days, I didn't even open my curtains. I avoided people. I avoided mirrors. Because I didn't like the woman staring back at me. My phone barely rang anymore. The same people who once called me Mama Grace now kept their distance. I understood. I had brought shame to the name of Christ. But the silence hurt. I missed my husband, not just his presence, but his prayers, his voice, his covering. One day, I sent him a message. "David, I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but please know I'm truly repentant." He didn't reply. That silence broke me. But I couldn't blame him. I had broken him too. Weeks turned into months. And one morning, I woke up and whispered, "Lord, if you're still here, please, don't give up on me." That day, something small changed. I picked up my Bible again. Not to prepare a sermon. Not to impress anyone. But to survive. My eyes landed on Psalm 51, David's cry after his own fall. "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin." As I read those words, I broke down completely. For the first time, I stopped defending myself and started repenting. I confessed everything, not to justify, not to explain, but to surrender. And in that brokenness, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because I was fixed, but because I was finally honest. Healing didn't happen overnight. Some days, I felt forgiven. Other days, the guilt returned like a shadow. But each time I prayed, I heard the same quiet whisper in my heart. My grace is sufficient. I started journaling my prayers, spending hours in quiet reflection. I stopped asking God to restore my image. And started asking Him to restore my soul. Slowly, I began volunteering again, not in church, but in a local women's shelter. I listened to stories of broken marriages, pain, betrayal. And for the first time, I felt I truly understood what they meant. God was using my wounds to touch others. I realized He hadn't disqualified me. He was rebuilding me. One morning, while praying, I wrote this in my journal. "Lord, even if I never stand beside my husband again. Even if no one ever calls me pastor's wife again. Let me never lose you again." That prayer became the start of my healing. Sometimes, God allows everything to fall apart. Not to punish us, but to rebuild us on truth. I had built my life on image, not intimacy. On reputation, not relationship. On service, not surrender. And in the wilderness, God stripped all of that away. Until there was nothing left. But me. And His mercy. I still remember the first day I decided to go back to church. My heart raced the entire morning. I almost changed my mind twice. I didn't know how people would look at me, or if they would even want me there. But something in my spirit whispered, "It's time." So I put on a plain dress, no makeup, no jewelry. Just me, stripped of everything I once hid behind. I walked into the church quietly, my hands trembling, my eyes fixed on the floor. Every seat felt like it carried a memory. The pulpit where I used to stand and lead worship. The front row where I sat beside my husband. The spot near the altar where I once lifted my hands in pride. When people saw me, the room went silent. Some gasped. Others whispered. A few looked away, as if my presence reminded them of something uncomfortable. My husband, Pastor David, was on the pulpit that morning. His face froze when he saw me. For a moment, I wished I could disappear. But then, I heard him clear his throat and say softly, "Brethren, today's message will be a little different. Someone has something to share with us." And then, he looked straight at me. My knees weakened. My heart pounded. But I stood up, slowly walked to the front, and faced the same church that once called me Mother of Faith. I took the microphone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it. "Church," I began. "I don't have a sermon today. I have a confession." You could hear a pin drop. "For years," I continued, "I stood here pretending to be strong in faith, while secretly living in sin. I deceived my husband. I deceived you. I deceived myself. I let pride, loneliness, and temptation lead me to a place I never thought I'd go. I thought I could hide my darkness behind ministry. But God found me. And He broke me, so He could rebuild me." I wept as I spoke. Every sentence felt like ripping open a wound. But I knew it had to bleed before it could heal. Some people began crying too. Others bowed their heads. I looked at my husband, expecting anger. But all I saw was pain and compassion. When I finished speaking, I handed him the microphone and whispered, "I'm sorry." He took a deep breath, wiped his eyes, and said something I'll never forget. "Grace, I forgive you. Because God forgave me too." I fell to my knees, crying uncontrollably. The entire church came forward, not to condemn, but to pray. In that moment, I understood something I had preached but never lived. Grace isn't for the perfect. It's for the broken. I thought confession was humiliation. But I realized it was liberation. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because people pitied me, but because I finally stopped pretending. After that service, I didn't expect to return to the pulpit. And I didn't. But I began sharing my story with women's groups, with those who were silently struggling. I told them, "You can serve God and still be empty inside. But don't let your emptiness drive you away from Him." My husband and I began counseling together again. Not as a perfect couple, but as two wounded people healed by mercy. Our marriage didn't become magical overnight. We had long nights of tears, boundaries, and rebuilding trust. But there was peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when truth replaces secrets. That day, when I confessed my sin before the church, I thought I was losing everything. But in truth, I was finding Jesus all over again. They say time heals all wounds. But I've learned it's not time that heals. It's truth, love, and grace. Months after my confession, life slowed down. The noise faded. The world stopped demanding perfection from me. For the first time in years, I woke up without pretending. I was still Grace. But now I understood what that name really meant. God had given me a second chance. Not to rebuild my image, but to rebuild my soul. David and I started meeting a marriage counselor. It wasn't easy. There were days we argued. Days he couldn't look me in the eyes. Days I couldn't forgive myself even though he had. But slowly, grace began to fill the spaces where guilt used to live. We began praying together again, awkwardly at first. But sincerely. Every amen felt like another stitch in a torn cloth being mended. One evening, I asked him, "David, why did you forgive me?" He smiled faintly and said, "Because I realized that God's forgiveness of me means I can't deny it to someone else. Even when it hurts." That night, I cried. Not out of shame this time, but out of gratitude. With time, the church also changed. Some people left. They couldn't handle a flawed pastor's wife. But others stayed. And God used my transparency to set them free too. Women began opening up about secret addictions, hidden affairs, emotional wounds they had buried under religious smiles. Our home became a place of healing. Not because we were perfect, but because we were honest. And honesty invites the Holy Spirit. Slowly, our ministry found a new mission. Helping people heal, not hide. I started a small group called Redeemed Hearts. We met every Saturday. Women from different walks of life. Sharing, crying, praying. Some were pastors' wives. Some were single mothers. Some were women living double lives just like I once did. And in every session, I reminded them, you are not your sin. You are not your past. You are the one Christ died for. And he hasn't changed his mind about you. Redemption doesn't erase the past. It redefines it. My scars didn't disappear. But now, they tell a different story. Before, they spoke of shame. Now, they speak of survival. Before, they marked disobedience. Now, they testify of mercy. I used to think I'd lost everything. My marriage, my reputation, my voice. But what I really lost was my pride. And that loss became my greatest blessing. I'm still the pastor's wife. But not the same one I used to be. Now, when I stand before people, I don't speak from knowledge. I speak from experience. I tell them how easy it is to fall when no one checks on your soul. I tell them that isolation kills faith faster than temptation. I tell them that pretending to be strong is not the same as being healed. And above all, I tell them that grace is not an excuse. It's an invitation. Today, my husband and I travel together, sharing our story with couples and churches. Some people still judge. Some still whisper. But that's okay. Because I no longer live for their approval. I live for the one who saved me when I least deserved it. And whenever someone asks, "Grace, how did you survive such shame?" I smile and say, because grace was not just my name. It was my story. If you've listened to my story this far, thank you. Thank you for giving me your time, your heart, and your silence long enough to hear the truth. I didn't share this story to gain sympathy. I shared it because someone out there is living like I once did. Hiding behind smiles. Drowning in guilt. Convincing everyone you're fine, while your soul quietly breaks. Maybe you serve in church. Maybe you lead worship. Maybe you post daily Bible verses. But deep down, you know something isn't right. You know the difference between performance and presence. Between religion and relationship. Between being seen and being known. I lived that lie for years. I told myself I was strong because everyone said I was. But truthfully, I was just busy. Too busy to notice my own emptiness. And that emptiness became a doorway for sin. But even there, in the darkness I created, God came looking for me. He didn't come with thunder or judgment. He came with mercy. Not to excuse what I'd done, but to remind me that I was still his. And if he could redeem me, the woman who betrayed her vows, who deceived her church, who nearly destroyed her marriage, then he can redeem you, too. God doesn't use perfect people. He uses forgiven people. And forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you receive when you finally stop hiding. I used to fear confession. But now I know. Confession isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your healing. So, if you're listening to this right now, and you feel too far gone, hear this. You are never too broken for grace. You are never too dirty for redemption. You are never too late for God's mercy. Because grace is not a name. It's a promise. And that promise is still alive for you. My name is Grace. And this was my story. But maybe it's yours too.